Ryan believed he had it all: a fulfilling career, a loving wife, and a future that seemed full of promise. He often marveled at how seamlessly his life had fallen into place. Melissa, his wife of 3 years, was his rock, a perfect balance of compassion and determination. Together, they shared dreams of building a family, traveling the world, and growing old side by side. As a software engineer, Ryan had climbed the ranks at his firm, earning the respect of his colleagues and a steady paycheck that allowed them a comfortable lifestyle. Melissa, on the other hand, thrived in the corporate world as an executive assistant to Victor Hale, the powerful and enigmatic CEO of Hale Enterprises. Despite the demanding nature of her job, Melissa found it rewarding, often sharing stories about her daily challenges and triumphs at the dinner table. Their home was a reflection of their love, walls adorned with photos of vacations, laughter echoing in the cozy living room, and quiet moments spent planning their future. They talked endlessly about starting a family, already debating names and envisioning nursery designs. Life felt like a puzzle where every piece had fallen into place. But perfection, as Ryan was beginning to learn, was often an illusion. Melissa's late nights at work started gradually. At first, it was the occasional evening spent finishing reports or coordinating Victor's travel plans. Ryan understood. Melissa was dedicated to her job and took pride in her ability to handle high-pressure situations. But as the weeks turned into months, those late nights became more frequent. "I'll be home late again," Melissa texted one Thursday evening, her words clipped and rushed. "Victor has a last-minute project he needs done by morning." Ryan frowned at the message, but responded with his usual support. "No problem. Let me know if you need anything." Melissa's texts were becoming increasingly brief, her once vivid descriptions of her day now reduced to vague updates. When she came home, she was often preoccupied, her mind seemingly elsewhere. The spark in their conversations began to dim, replaced by silence or distracted nods. "Work has been stressful lately," Melissa said one evening when Ryan gently pressed her about her long hours. "Victor's demanding, but he's the boss. I have to deliver." Ryan nodded, wanting to believe her. "Just don't let it take over your life, okay? We still need time for us." Melissa smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, things will calm down soon." But they didn't. Melissa's once effervescent demeanor grew more subdued, her laughter less frequent. Ryan started to notice other changes. Her phone seemed to buzz constantly, and she often turned it face down or tucked it away when he was nearby. She began paying more attention to her appearance, opting for more polished outfits and professional makeup even on casual office days. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between them, but he dismissed his doubts. Melissa had never given him a reason to question her loyalty, and he trusted her implicitly. Still, the unease lingered, a quiet whisper in the back of his mind. One evening, as Ryan set the table for dinner, Melissa walked in, her face tense. "I'm sorry," she said, her tone hurried. "I forgot to tell you, I have to fly out with Victor for a client meeting next week. It's last minute." Ryan looked up, his brow furrowing. "Another trip? You just got back from one last month." "I know," Melissa said, sighing, "but this one's important. He's counting on me." Ryan nodded slowly, hiding his disappointment. "Okay, just don't overwork yourself." Melissa smiled faintly and kissed his cheek. "Thanks for understanding." As she disappeared into the bedroom to pack, Ryan sat at the table, staring at the untouched dinner he had prepared. He told himself that this was temporary, that Melissa's dedication to her job was a testament to her character. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that their perfect life was starting to crack. That night, as Melissa slept beside him, Ryan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He replayed the little moments that had begun to unsettle him, the hurried texts, the late nights, the subtle shifts in her behavior. He wanted to believe it was nothing more than work stress, but the unease in his chest refused to fade. Ryan had always prided himself on being a supportive husband, someone who trusted Melissa unconditionally. But as the weeks passed, the distance between them grew, and Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was coming between them. He didn't know it yet, But his once perfect life was about to be tested in ways he never could have imagined. The cracks in Ryan and Melissa's marriage widened, though neither of them openly acknowledged it. Ryan tried to convince himself that the changes he was noticing were temporary, that the stress Melissa carried would dissipate once things at work settled down. But his optimism was slowly being replaced by a gnawing sense of unease. Melissa became increasingly withdrawn, often brushing off Ryan's attempts to connect. Conversations that once flowed easily were now stilted, filled with vague responses and hurried excuses. "How was your day?" Ryan asked one evening as they sat across from each other at the dinner table. "Busy," Melissa replied, her eyes fixed on her plate. "Victor's been on my case about deadlines. It's exhausting." Ryan frowned, sensing there was more to the story. "What about after work? Did you have time to relax?" Melissa hesitated, then shrugged. "Not really. I stayed late to finish some reports." Her phone buzzed on the counter, drawing both their gazes. Melissa reached for it quickly, turning the screen away as she read the message. Ryan watched her, his heart sinking. "Work again?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. "Yeah," she said shortly, setting the phone face down. "Victor's just being difficult." It wasn't the first time Victor's name had come up in their conversations. Ryan had never met him in person, but from Melissa's stories, he had painted a picture of a demanding, egotistical boss who thrived on control. Melissa had often joked about his arrogance, but lately, her tone had shifted from playful to cautious. Ryan couldn't tell if it was genuine respect or something else entirely. The tension came to a head at one of Victor's corporate events. Melissa had insisted they attend, calling it a networking opportunity and a chance for Ryan to meet her colleagues. Ryan wasn't particularly eager to go, but he wanted to support her. The event was lavish, held in a sprawling ballroom with crystal chandeliers and a live jazz band. Melissa looked stunning in a sleek navy dress, her hair swept up in an elegant bun. Ryan couldn't help but feel a swell of pride as they entered the room together, hand in hand. As the evening progressed, Ryan mingled with Melissa's coworkers, listening politely as they discussed corporate strategies and upcoming projects. But he couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, a guest in a world where Melissa seemed to belong completely. When Victor finally approached, Ryan felt an immediate dislike. The man was tall and imposing, with an air of confidence that bordered on smugness. His eyes lingered on Melissa just a fraction too long, and his handshake with Ryan was firm but dismissive. "So, you're the husband," Victor said, his tone vaguely condescending. "Melissa's told me all about you." Ryan forced a smile. "All good things, I hope?" Victor chuckled, his gaze flicking to Melissa. "Of course. She's one of the best. Couldn't do half of what I do without her." Melissa smiled politely, but Ryan noticed the slight flush in her cheeks. As the conversation continued, Victor's attention remained fixed on her, his compliments increasingly personal. "You've been incredible lately, Melissa," Victor said, his tone smooth. "I don't know how you juggle everything so effortlessly." "She's always been good at multitasking," Ryan interjected, his voice sharper than he intended. Victor raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed. "Lucky man," he said, his gaze returning to Melissa. "Very lucky." Ryan's stomach churned with unease, but he held his tongue. Later that evening, as they drove home, he couldn't keep quiet any longer. "What's the deal with Victor?" he asked, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. "The way he looks at you, it's not professional." Melissa sighed, leaning her head against the window. "Ryan, he's like that with everyone. It's just his personality." "It didn't feel like that," Ryan pressed. "It felt like he was crossing a line." "You're overreacting," Melissa said, her tone clipped. "Victor's demanding, sure, but he's not inappropriate. You don't know him like I do." The words stung more than Ryan cared to admit. He fell silent, unsure how to respond. Melissa's defensiveness only deepened his suspicion, but he didn't want to push her further. Instead, he let the conversation drop, though the uneasy feeling in his chest remained. In the weeks that followed, Melissa's late nights became more frequent, and her excuses less convincing. Ryan noticed her hesitation when he asked about her day, the way she avoided eye contact when Victor's name came up. Her phone was always buzzing, and she seemed to guard it like a lifeline. One night, as Ryan waited for Melissa to come home, he scrolled through his thoughts, trying to make sense of the changes in their relationship. He wanted to believe her, to trust that nothing was wrong. But the cracks in their perfect life were becoming harder to ignore. When Melissa finally walked through the door, looking exhausted and distant, Ryan tried one last time to bridge the gap between them. "Melissa, is everything okay?" he asked softly. "You've been so stressed lately. I just want to help." She sighed, dropping her bag on the floor. "It's work, Ryan. That's all it is. Victor's been pushing me harder than usual, and it's taking a toll. Can we not talk about it right now?" Ryan nodded reluctantly, watching as she disappeared into the bedroom. He wanted to believe her words, to dismiss his doubts as paranoia. But as he sat alone in the quiet living room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, undeniably wrong. Ryan wasn't a suspicious man by nature. Trust had always been the foundation of his relationship with Melissa, and he prided himself on being supportive, even during her most stressful times at work. But lately, his instincts had been screaming at him, louder with each passing day. It was another late night when Ryan decided he couldn't stay idle anymore. Melissa had texted him earlier, claiming that Victor had scheduled a last-minute meeting to finalize a critical project. Her tone in the message had been apologetic but curt, a far cry from the warmth he was used to. As Ryan sat in their living room, the ticking of the wall clock seemed unbearably loud. He glanced at the time, 9:30 p.m., and sighed. He told himself he was overthinking again, but the unease in his chest wouldn't dissipate. Against his better judgment, he grabbed his keys and headed for Melissa's office. Hale Enterprises building was an imposing glass structure downtown, even more intimidating under the dim glow of city lights. Ryan parked across the street, hesitating for a moment before stepping out of the car. He felt ridiculous, like some paranoid husband in a bad soap opera, but he couldn't shake the need to know. As he entered the building, the security guard at the front desk gave him a curious look. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here to see my wife, Melissa. She works for Victor Hale," Ryan explained, trying to keep his voice casual. The guard hesitated, then gestured toward the elevator. "Top floor. Offices are mostly empty by now, though." Ryan nodded his thanks and stepped into the elevator, his heart pounding. When the doors opened to the top floor, the quiet was unsettling. The hallways were dimly lit, the faint hum of fluorescent lights the only sound. He walked toward Melissa's office, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. What he saw when he reached her office stopped him in his tracks. Through the glass door, Ryan spotted Melissa at her desk, Victor leaning over her with a smug grin. His hand rested casually on her shoulder, fingers brushing her skin as he spoke. Melissa didn't pull away, though her posture was stiff, her expression unreadable. Ryan's blood boiled. He shoved the door open, his voice louder than he intended. "What the hell is going on here?" Melissa jumped, her eyes wide with shock. Victor, on the other hand, barely reacted. He straightened, slipping his hands into his pockets, his smirk unwavering. "Ryan," Melissa stammered, standing up quickly, "what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," Ryan snapped, his gaze shifting between her and Victor. "It doesn't look like you're working." Victor chuckled, his confidence infuriating. "Relax, Ryan. You're overreacting. Melissa and I were just discussing some last-minute changes to the project." Ryan ignored him, turning to Melissa. "Is that true? Because this doesn't look professional to me." Melissa opened her mouth to respond, but Victor cut her off. "Look, if you're here to cause a scene, I'd suggest you leave. This is my office, not your living room." Ryan stepped closer, his fists clenched. "Don't talk to me like that, and don't touch my wife." Victor raised an eyebrow, his smirk deepening. "Your wife? Funny, she doesn't seem to mind." The insinuation was like gasoline on a fire. Before Ryan could stop himself, he lunged at Victor, shoving him against the desk. "Say that again, and I'll—" "Ryan, stop!" Melissa cried, pulling him back. "What are you doing?" Victor straightened his suit, looking more amused than intimidated. "You've got quite the temper, don't you? No wonder Melissa's been spending so much time here." Ryan's eyes narrowed, his breath coming in sharp bursts. You're crossing a line. And what are you going to do about it? Victor taunted, stepping closer. Face me man to man? Or just run home like the insecure little husband you are? Melissa stepped between them, her voice desperate. That's enough. Both of you. Ryan looked at her, searching her face for any sign of reassurance, any indication that Victor's taunts were baseless. But Melissa wouldn't meet his gaze. Her silence felt like a betrayal in itself. Let's go, she said, grabbing Ryan's arm and pulling him toward the door. This isn't the time or place. Ryan allowed her to lead him out of the office, but his anger simmered just below the surface. As they descended in the elevator, he turned to her, his voice low but filled with pain. Why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you say anything? Melissa sighed, rubbing her temples. Because it's not worth it, Ryan. He's my boss. I can't just push back every time he steps out of line. That's not stepping out of line, Ryan said, his voice rising. That's disrespecting you and us. Can we not do this here? Melissa pleaded. Let's talk about it at home. By the time they reached their apartment, the silence between them was suffocating. Ryan paced the living room while Melissa sat on the couch, her arms crossed defensively. I can't believe you're letting him get away with this, Ryan said finally. Do you even care how this makes me feel? Of course I care, Melissa snapped. But you're blowing this out of proportion. Victor's just difficult. It's how he is. That's not an excuse, Ryan shot back. He doesn't respect you, Melissa. And he sure as hell doesn't respect me. Melissa looked away, her jaw tight. I don't know what you want me to do, Ryan. I can't afford to lose this job. Ryan stared at her, his heart sinking. Is it worth losing us? Melissa didn't answer, and the silence that followed spoke louder than words. For the first time, Ryan felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, his once solid marriage crumbling beneath his feet. And he didn't know how to stop the fall. Ryan's world felt like it was spinning out of control. The confrontation at Melissa's office had only deepened the rift between them, and the unresolved tension hung over their home like a storm cloud. Ryan couldn't let go of what he had seen. Victor's smug expression, the way Melissa had stayed silent, the unanswered questions that gnawed at him. The final blow came one evening when Melissa left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. Ryan hadn't intended to invade her privacy, but the constant buzzing of notifications pulled his attention. When he saw Victor's name on the screen, his stomach tightened. Against his better judgment, he unlocked the phone. What he found shattered whatever was left of his trust. The texts weren't just work-related. Victor had sent messages that were unmistakably flirtatious, crossing every professional boundary. Thinking about you again, one read, followed by, you looked incredible in that dress today. I couldn't focus on anything else. Melissa's responses were a mix of polite deflection and troubling ambiguity. She never encouraged his advances outright, but she also didn't shut them down. Let's stay professional, Victor, one message read, but another said, I really can't do this. Ryan's mind raced as he tried to piece together the meaning behind her words. Was she rejecting Victor's advances? Or was she conflicted, trapped in a web of her own making? Either way, her failure to tell him about the situation felt like a betrayal. When Melissa emerged from the shower, Ryan was waiting in the living room, her phone clutched in his hand. She froze when she saw his expression. Ryan, she began cautiously, her eyes darting to the phone. What's going on? Care to explain these? He asked, his voice shaking as he held up the screen. Melissa's face drained of color. You went through my phone? Don't make this about me, Ryan snapped. What are these messages, Melissa? Why is Victor talking to you like this? And why haven't you told me? Melissa sank onto the couch, her shoulders slumping. It's not what you think, she said quietly. Then tell me what it is, Ryan demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been keeping a lot from me. Melissa hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. Victor's been inappropriate, she admitted finally. He's been making comments, sending texts, but I didn't know how to handle it. Handle it? Ryan repeated, his voice rising. Melissa, this isn't just inappropriate, it's harassment. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to make things worse, Melissa said, her voice breaking. Victor's my boss, Ryan. He has the power to ruin my career. I thought I could manage it on my own. Ryan shook his head, the anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. You thought you could manage it by keeping me in the dark? By letting him think this behavior is okay? I didn't let him think anything, Melissa protested. I told him to stop, but he doesn't listen. Then why are you still working for him? Ryan demanded. Why haven't you reported him? Melissa looked away, tears streaming down her face. Because I'm scared, she whispered. Scared of what he'll do. Scared of losing my job. Scared of everything. Ryan softened slightly at her vulnerability, but the damage had already been done. You should have come to me, he said, his voice quieter now. We're supposed to be a team, Melissa, but you shut me out and let him disrespect both of us. I'm sorry, Melissa said, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know what else to do. Ryan stared at her, torn between his love for her and the betrayal he felt. We can't keep going like this, he said finally. You need to decide what's more important, your job or our marriage. Melissa's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. Don't make me choose, Ryan. Please. I'm not making you do anything, Ryan said, his tone resolute. But I won't stand by and watch Victor treat you like this. If you won't stand up for yourself, I'll do it for you. Melissa looked at him, her expression a mixture of guilt and fear. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure he knows he can't get away with this, Ryan said firmly. He's crossed the line for the last time. That night, Ryan lay awake, staring at the ceiling as his mind churned. He knew confronting Victor again would only escalate things, but he couldn't sit by and do nothing. Victor's arrogance, Melissa's silence, and the strain it had placed on their marriage were pushing him to his breaking point. The next morning, as Melissa left for work, Ryan's resolve hardened. He would confront Victor on his own terms, away from the sterile walls of the office and the watchful eyes of Melissa's colleagues. He needed to send a clear message that his marriage and his dignity were not to be trifled with. Ryan knew the risks, but his anger outweighed his caution. Victor had pushed him too far, and Ryan was determined to fight back, no matter the cost. Ryan had never considered himself a violent man, but his patience was gone. Victor had crossed too many lines. His arrogance, his harassment of Melissa, and his complete disregard for boundaries were more than Ryan could tolerate. It was no longer just about his marriage. It was about standing up for himself and for Melissa, who had been too afraid to fight back. The opportunity came sooner than Ryan expected. Melissa mentioned another late-night meeting Victor had scheduled, claiming it was crucial for the company's upcoming presentation. Her reluctance to attend was obvious, but her fear of Victor outweighed her discomfort. That evening, Ryan waited until Melissa had left the apartment before driving to Hale Enterprises. He parked a few blocks away, his heart pounding as he rehearsed what he would say. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a calculated move. He needed to confront Victor away from Melissa, to let him know there were consequences for his actions. The company parking lot was nearly empty when Ryan arrived. Victor's sleek black car was parked in its usual spot, a symbol of his wealth and power. Ryan lingered in the shadows, watching as Victor emerged from the building a few minutes later. He was alone, his confident stride and smug expression as infuriating as ever. Victor, Ryan called, stepping into the dim light of a nearby street lamp. Victor stopped, turning toward the voice. When he saw Ryan, his smirk returned. Well, if it isn't the doting husband, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. What brings you here? Checking up on Melissa again? Ryan clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. We need to talk. Victor laughed, shaking his head. I don't think we do. Melissa's perfectly capable of making her own decisions. Maybe you should trust her for a change. This isn't about trust, Ryan said, stepping closer. It's about respect. Something you clearly don't understand. Victor's expression hardened, his smirk fading. Careful, Ryan. You're walking a fine line. No, you're the one walking a fine line, Ryan shot back. You've been harassing my wife, crossing boundaries, and acting like you're untouchable. But you're not. Victor chuckled, his arrogance returning. Harassing? Is that what she told you? Melissa's a grown woman. If she didn't want my attention, she could have left. But she hasn't, has she? Ryan's blood boiled, his anger barely contained. She stayed because she's scared of losing her job, because you've made her feel trapped. Victor stepped closer, his voice low and taunting. Or maybe she stayed because she likes the attention. Did you ever think of that? Ryan's restraint snapped. He lunged at Victor, grabbing him by the collar and shoving him against the hood of his car. Say that again, and I swear. Victor struggled, shoving Ryan back and raising his fists. You think you can intimidate me? You're nothing, Ryan. Just some insecure husband who can't handle the truth. Victor swung first, his punch grazing Ryan's jaw. The strike only fueled Ryan's rage. He retaliated with a force Victor clearly hadn't expected, landing a blow to his ribs that sent him stumbling. The fight was brutal and chaotic. Victor, though larger and seemingly confident in his physical abilities, was no match for Ryan's determination. Every punch, every shove carried years of frustration, anger, and pain. Victor's smug demeanor quickly crumbled as he realized he was outmatched. Ryan's final blow sent Victor to the ground, clutching his arm and groaning in pain. Blood trickled from his nose, and his face was twisted in agony. You're insane, Victor spat, his voice weak. You'll regret this. Ryan stood over him, breathing heavily. No, Victor. You're the one who'll regret it. Stay away from Melissa. Stay away from us. Or next time, it won't just be a warning. Victor glared at him but didn't respond, too humiliated to continue the confrontation. Ryan turned and walked away, his knuckles bruised and his body aching, but his resolve stronger than ever. As he drove home, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a mix of relief and apprehension. He had stood up to Victor, but at what cost? Would this escalate further? Would Melissa see his actions as a defense of their marriage or a reckless mistake? When Ryan walked through the door, Melissa was waiting. Her eyes widened when she saw the bruises on his face and the blood on his shirt. What happened? She asked, rushing to his side. I confronted him, Ryan said simply, his voice steady. Melissa stared at him, her emotions warring between anger and concern. Ryan, you can't just… I had to, he interrupted. I couldn't sit back and let him treat you, or us, like this. Tears filled her eyes as she placed a hand on his cheek. You shouldn't have had to do that. I'm so sorry, Ryan. I never wanted it to come to this. Ryan pulled her into a hug, his voice soft but firm. It's over now. He knows not to mess with us again. Melissa nodded against his chest, but the weight of the situation still hung heavily in the air. They had faced a turning point, one that could either break them further or bring them closer together. For now, Ryan was content knowing he had taken a stand. But he also knew this was just the beginning of the fallout, and they would need each other more than ever in the days to come. The fallout from Ryan's confrontation with Victor was immediate and far-reaching. Ryan knew the moment he saw flashing lights in his rearview mirror on his way to work the next morning that the situation had escalated beyond what he had anticipated. Two uniformed officers approached his car, their expressions neutral but firm. Mr. Ryan Harris? One of them asked. Ryan nodded, his heart sinking. Yes, that's me. You're under arrest for assault, the officer said. Please step out of the vehicle. Ryan's stomach churned, but he complied without resistance. As they cuffed him and read him his rights, he realized Victor must have filed charges. The smug CEO wasn't going to let the fight go unanswered. At the police station, Ryan was allowed one call. He didn't hesitate. He dialed Melissa. When she answered, her voice was a mix of relief and panic. Ryan, where are you? What's going on? I've been arrested, he said, his tone flat. Victor pressed charges. There was silence on the other end before Melissa spoke again, her voice shaking. I'll be there as soon as I can. Melissa arrived an hour later with their lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Claire who quickly got to work. After reviewing the charges and the security footage Victor had provided, Claire met with Ryan in the holding room. You're lucky, Claire said, her tone brisk. The footage shows Victor throwing the first punch. That'll work in your favor. But you didn't exactly hold back, Ryan. Breaking his ribs and leaving him on the ground doesn't look great. Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. He's been harassing Melissa for months. I couldn't just let him get away with it. Claire nodded. I understand, and we'll make sure the court does too. But next time, don't take matters into your own hands. With Claire's help, Ryan was released on bail later that day. As they drove home, the weight of the situation settled over him. Melissa sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She hadn't said much since picking him up, and the silence was deafening. When they got home, Melissa finally spoke. Ryan, what were you thinking? You could have gone to the police instead of confronting him. I was thinking about you, Ryan said, his voice rising. I was thinking about how he's been treating you like some plaything and how you've been too scared to stand up to him. Tears welled in Melissa's eyes. I know, but this isn't the way to fix it. Now you're the one facing charges. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, his frustration boiling over. I was trying to protect you, Melissa, but you let this go on for too long. You should have told me everything from the start. Melissa's tears spilled over as she sank onto the couch. I know I made mistakes. I should have handled it differently. But I was scared, Ryan. Scared of what he could do to my career, to us. Ryan's anger softened as he sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. We'll get through this, he said quietly. But we need to be honest with each other. No more secrets. No more letting fear control us. Melissa nodded against his chest. I'm so sorry, Ryan. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and difficult conversations. Victor's injuries made headlines in the corporate world, and the board of directors at Hale Enterprises launched an internal investigation. Witnesses confirmed that Victor had instigated the fight, and the security footage backed up their claims. As a result, Ryan's charges were downgraded to misdemeanor assault, and he avoided jail time by agreeing to community service and anger management classes. For Melissa, the aftermath was a wake-up call. She couldn't continue working for a company that allowed someone like Victor to thrive. After long discussions with Ryan, she submitted her resignation. It was a difficult decision. She had worked hard to build her career, but she knew it was the right one. Victor, meanwhile, faced his own set of consequences. News of his behavior spread through the company, and former employees came forward with similar complaints. The board, desperate to salvage their reputation, forced Victor to take a leave of absence while they conducted a formal review. Melissa's departure marked the beginning of a new chapter for her and Ryan. She began focusing on rebuilding her confidence and finding a new career path, while Ryan used the experience as an opportunity to reflect on his own actions. You know, Ryan said one evening as they sat on the porch, Claire was right. I shouldn't have let my anger get the best of me, but I don't regret standing up to him. Melissa reached for his hand, her expression soft. I don't blame you for being angry, Ryan. Victor pushed you, and me, to our limits. But we have to find healthier ways to deal with challenges like this. Ryan nodded, squeezing her hand. That's why I'm doing the anger management classes. Not just for me, but for us. Melissa smiled, her eyes glistening with gratitude. We'll get through this together. As the weeks turned into months, Ryan and Melissa worked hard to heal the wounds that Victor's presence had inflicted on their marriage. Therapy sessions helped them rebuild their communication and trust, while their shared determination to move forward brought them closer than ever. Victor's downfall, though satisfying, was no longer their focus. For Ryan and Melissa, the true victory was in reclaiming their lives and rediscovering the strength of their partnership. The fallout from Victor's actions had left scars on both Ryan and Melissa, but those wounds were slowly beginning to heal. Their therapy sessions were helping them navigate the pain and resentment that had built up over months of miscommunication and fear. For Ryan, the sessions were a chance to express the anger and betrayal he had felt, while Melissa confronted her guilt for not being honest sooner. But the process of rebuilding wasn't without its challenges. Melissa struggled with a sense of identity after leaving her job. Hale Enterprises had been her professional world for years, and while her resignation had been necessary, it left her feeling adrift. Ryan did his best to support her, encouraging her to explore new opportunities and reminding her that her worth wasn't tied to a single job. You've always been so much more than your career, Ryan told her one evening as they cooked dinner together. You're strong, smart, and capable of doing anything you set your mind to. Melissa smiled faintly, grateful for his unwavering belief in her. It's just hard to start over, she admitted, but I know I need to. As she began exploring her options, Melissa found herself drawn to causes that resonated with her recent experiences. She started volunteering at a non-profit organization that supported victims of workplace harassment, sharing her story to help others find their voice. It was both cathartic and empowering, giving her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. For Ryan, the aftermath of his confrontation with Victor had forced him to confront his own vulnerabilities. The anger management classes he attended were a humbling experience, but they also gave him valuable tools for handling conflict. He realized that his outburst in the parking lot had stemmed not just from anger at Victor, but also from a deep-seated fear of losing Melissa. During one session, the instructor had asked the group to reflect on the root of their anger. Ryan's answer had been simple but profound. I was scared. Scared that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't protect the people I love. The realization was a turning point for Ryan. He began to let go of the idea that he had to control every situation to ensure the safety and happiness of his family. Instead, he focused on being present, supportive, and open to vulnerability. Their progress was tested one evening when Melissa received an unexpected message. It was from Victor. What does it say? Ryan asked, his voice tense as Melissa stared at her phone. It's an apology, Melissa said slowly, reading the message aloud. He says he's sorry for everything, for crossing boundaries, for disrespecting me and us. He says he's stepping away from the company and wants to make amends. Ryan's jaw tightened. Do you believe him? Melissa shook her head. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. I'm not looking for closure from him. I've already found it with you. Ryan exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. Good. He doesn't deserve your forgiveness. Melissa set the phone aside, her expression resolute. I've moved on from him. He's not worth any more of my time or energy. Victor's departure from Hale Enterprises soon became public knowledge. The board had forced him to resign after multiple employees came forward with complaints of harassment and misconduct. While the news brought a sense of justice, Ryan and Melissa were careful not to let it dominate their lives. They had more important things to focus on, each other and their future. As part of their healing process, they began making small but meaningful changes to their routine. They scheduled weekly date nights, took weekend trips to nearby towns, and spent lazy Sundays binge-watching their favorite shows. The simple act of spending quality time together reminded them of why they had fallen in love in the first place. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset, Ryan turned to Melissa with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever think about what's next for us? Melissa tilted her head, smiling. What do you mean? I mean, now that we've made it through all of this, what's the next chapter? Are we ready to start thinking about a family again? Melissa's smile widened, her eyes sparkling. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And yes, I think we're ready. Ryan reached for her hand, his heart swelling with hope. I want that too. A fresh start. A family. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship grew stronger than ever. Melissa's work with the nonprofit became a full-time role, and Ryan found a renewed sense of purpose in his own career. Together, they began planning for the future with excitement and optimism. Victor's shadow no longer loomed over their lives. He had become a distant memory, a cautionary tale of power abused and the strength it took to stand against it. For Ryan and Melissa, the real victory was in their ability to rebuild, stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever. Victor Hale's downfall was the kind of spectacle that seemed plucked from a corporate drama. Once hailed as a visionary leader with unmatched charisma, he was now the center of scandal. His forced resignation from Hale Enterprises made headlines, accompanied by allegations of harassment, misconduct, and abuse of power. For those who had suffered under his reign, it was vindication. For Victor, it was public humiliation. Melissa watched the news unfold with a mix of emotions. Sitting on the couch beside Ryan, she read an article detailing the growing number of lawsuits filed against Victor by former employees. The accounts were eerily similar to her own experiences: verbal harassment, inappropriate advances, and a toxic culture of fear and silence. "It's all coming out now," Melissa said quietly, setting her phone on the coffee table. "I'm not surprised. He always acted like he was untouchable." Ryan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "How do you feel about it?" Melissa thought for a moment, her gaze distant. "Relieved, I guess. It's validating to see the truth exposed, to know it wasn't just me. But it's also hard. I keep thinking about how long he got away with it." Ryan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You were brave, Melissa. Even when you felt trapped, you found a way to get out. And now you're helping others who've been in the same position." Melissa nodded, grateful for his support. Her work at the nonprofit had become a source of strength, allowing her to turn her pain into purpose. She had started leading workshops on workplace harassment, sharing her story with others who felt silenced. It wasn't always easy. Reliving her experiences could be emotionally taxing, but it was worth it to see the impact she was making. One day, while preparing for a seminar, Melissa received an unexpected email. It was from a former colleague at Hale Enterprises, someone she hadn't spoken to since her resignation. "Hi, Melissa. I just wanted to reach out and say thank you. I read about your work with the nonprofit, and it's inspiring. A lot of us were too scared to speak up when Victor was in charge, but seeing you take a stand has given us courage. I've decided to file my own complaint against him, and I'm not the only one. You've made a difference." Melissa stared at the screen, her chest tightening. She hadn't realized how far the ripple effects of her actions had spread. Tears welled in her eyes as she forwarded the email to Ryan with a simple note. "This is why it was worth it." Ryan read the email later that evening, his pride in Melissa growing even stronger. "You're incredible," he said, wrapping his arms around her. "You've turned something awful into something meaningful." Melissa smiled, leaning into his embrace. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my rock through all of this." The legal fallout for Victor continued to mount. Multiple lawsuits were filed, ranging from harassment claims to financial misconduct. The board of directors at Hale Enterprises issued a public statement condemning his actions, desperate to salvage the company's reputation. Victor's once untouchable empire crumbled, leaving him a cautionary tale of power abused and arrogance unchecked. For Ryan and Melissa, the news brought a sense of closure. They no longer felt haunted by Victor's presence, free to focus on their lives and their future. As the scandal faded from the headlines, they turned their attention to building the life they had always dreamed of. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the stars, Ryan looked at Melissa with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think you'll ever feel completely at peace with what happened?" Melissa considered the question, her gaze fixed on the night sky. "I think so," she said finally. "It's taken time, but I've realized that what happened doesn't define me. It's a part of my story, but it's not the whole story." Ryan nodded, his hand resting on hers. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. And whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Melissa smiled, her heart full of gratitude. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" "We have," Ryan agreed. "And the best part is, we're just getting started." As the weeks turned into months, their lives continued to blossom. Melissa's nonprofit work expanded, and Ryan took on a mentorship role at his company, helping younger employees navigate their careers. Together, they found joy in the simple moments, quiet evenings at home, weekend hikes, and planning for their future family. Victor's name eventually disappeared from the news, replaced by other scandals and stories. For Ryan and Melissa, he was no longer a looming figure in their lives, but a reminder of how far they had come. They had faced the storm and come out stronger, their bond unshaken by the trials they had endured. In the end, it wasn't Victor's downfall that mattered most. It was the life they had rebuilt together, stronger and more resilient than ever. Rebuilding their relationship after months of strain was not easy, but Ryan and Melissa had proven to themselves and each other that their love was worth the effort. The betrayal they had felt, whether through silence, fear, or anger, had been painful, but it had also forced them to confront the deeper layers of their bond. For the first time in a long time, they were truly listening to each other. Therapy had helped open the door, but it was the day-to-day acts of kindness and communication that made the biggest difference. Ryan made an effort to ask about Melissa's work at the nonprofit, while Melissa took time to understand Ryan's struggles at work and with his anger management classes. These shared moments of vulnerability became the foundation of their renewed connection. One evening, after Grace, their goddaughter, visited and left a handmade card on the coffee table, Melissa found herself staring at the drawing. It was a simple, childlike depiction of a family, a man, a woman, and two children holding hands under a bright sun. Written in crayon underneath were the words, "A happy family like yours." Melissa held the card in her hands as Ryan walked into the room, drying his hands with a dish towel. "What's that?" he asked, sitting beside her. "It's from Grace," Melissa said, smiling softly. "She thinks we're a perfect family." Ryan chuckled, leaning back against the couch. "If only she knew how much work it's taken to get here." Melissa looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think we're ready to grow our family?" Ryan's smile faltered for a moment, replaced by a look of quiet contemplation. "I think we are," he said finally, "but only if you're ready too." Melissa nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I am. I think I've been ready for a while, but I was too scared to admit it." Ryan reached for her hand, his touch reassuring. "We've faced worse things together. We can handle this too." With that decision made, the couple began taking steps toward their shared dream. They set appointments with doctors, discussed names, and began making plans to convert the guest room into a nursery. It was a fresh chapter for them, one filled with hope and a sense of renewal. Their joy, however, wasn't free of challenges. While they had left Victor's shadow behind, Melissa still carried moments of self-doubt. Her work at the nonprofit had opened her eyes to just how pervasive workplace harassment could be, and she sometimes found herself wondering if she had truly done enough to address it. "Melissa," Ryan said one evening as they cooked dinner together, "you're making a difference. I see it every day in the emails you get, the workshops you lead. Don't let anyone, not even yourself, downplay what you're doing." Melissa smiled, grateful for his encouragement. "It's just hard to feel like it's ever enough. There are so many people out there who are still struggling." "That's the nature of change," Ryan said. "It's slow, but it starts with people like you. You're giving others the courage to speak up, and that's more than most people ever do." His words stayed with her, bolstering her confidence as she continued her work. Meanwhile, Ryan found his own ways to contribute to their shared mission of creating a better world. He began mentoring young professionals at his company, focusing on fostering a workplace culture of respect and inclusion. Their rekindled love extended beyond their relationship. They became a stronger team, supporting each other in ways they hadn't before. Whether it was helping with Melissa's nonprofit events or attending Ryan's company gatherings, they were present for each other in every sense of the word. One evening, after a particularly long day, Melissa surprised Ryan with a picnic in the park. They sat under a canopy of stars, laughing and reminiscing about their early days together. As they lay side by side on the blanket, Ryan turned to her with a smile. "You know what I've realized?" he asked. "What?" "That all the hard times, all the fights, all the struggles, they brought us here. And I wouldn't trade this for anything." Melissa's eyes filled with tears, her heart swelling with love. "Neither would I," she said. "We're stronger because of everything we've been through. And I'm so grateful we found our way back to each other." As the night wore on, they talked about their dreams for the future. The family they hoped to build, the places they wanted to visit, and the life they were creating together. For the first time in a long time, the future felt bright, untainted by the shadows of the past. Melissa began to see Ryan not just as her husband, but as her partner in every sense of the word. He was the person who had stood by her when things fell apart, who had fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, and who had believed in her even when she doubted herself. Ryan, in turn, saw Melissa as his anchor, the person who had weathered his flaws and shown him the strength of forgiveness and resilience. Together, they had proven that love wasn't about perfection. It was about perseverance. Their renewed commitment to each other culminated in a small ceremony to renew their vows. Surrounded by close friends and family, they stood in their backyard, hands clasped, and promised to continue loving and supporting each other through whatever challenges lay ahead. "You've taught me what it means to fight for love," Melissa said during her vows, her voice trembling with emotion. And I'll keep fighting for us every day. Ryan smiled, his heart full. You've shown me the power of forgiveness and the strength of a partnership. I'll stand by you, always. As they exchanged rings once more, their guests erupted in applause, their love and support palpable. For Ryan and Melissa, it wasn't just a renewal of their vows. It was a celebration of the journey they had taken to get there. And as they danced under the soft glow of string lights, surrounded by laughter and love, they knew they had found their way back to each other, stronger than ever. The move to a new city marked the beginning of a fresh chapter for Ryan and Melissa. They had left behind the lingering shadows of Victor's influence and the turbulent memories tied to their old life. Their new home was a modest but beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, with a yard big enough for the family they hoped to grow. For Ryan, the relocation was also an opportunity to pursue his dream of running his own software firm. After years of working under others, he was ready to build something from the ground up, something he could call his own. Melissa, ever the supportive partner, encouraged him every step of the way. She helped him brainstorm ideas, create a vision, and manage the challenges that came with launching a new business. I think this is going to be big, Melissa said one evening as they sat in their home office, reviewing his business plan. You've got the drive, the talent, and now the freedom to make it happen. Ryan smiled, her words bolstering his confidence. I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for you, he admitted. You've been my anchor through everything. As Ryan's business grew, Melissa continued her work with the nonprofit, eventually expanding its reach to their new city. She began collaborating with local organizations, hosting workshops, and speaking at events about workplace harassment and the importance of fostering inclusive environments. Her passion for helping others had only deepened, and she found immense fulfillment in the work. Their days were busy but rewarding, filled with a renewed sense of purpose. In the evenings, they often sat together on their porch, sipping tea and reflecting on how far they had come. The peace they felt in those moments was hard-earned, and they never took it for granted. One weekend, as they unpacked boxes in the spare bedroom, Ryan paused and looked around the space. It's going to be a perfect nursery, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. Melissa turned to him, her eyes sparkling. It will be. And I can't wait to see it filled with laughter and little footsteps. They had started trying for a baby, a decision that felt like the culmination of their journey. The prospect of becoming parents brought them closer, deepening their bond as they planned for the future. They discussed names, debated over crib designs, and even painted the room a soft, neutral yellow. The anticipation was tempered with moments of reflection. Melissa often found herself thinking about how far they had come, how the challenges they had faced had tested their love but also strengthened it. Victor's actions had been a dark chapter in their story, but it was one that had ultimately led them to where they were now, stronger, more united, and ready for the future. Justice for Victor had come in full measure. His resignation from Hale Enterprises had been the beginning of his downfall. Lawsuits from former employees drained his fortune, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. Melissa and Ryan no longer kept tabs on the news surrounding him, but they occasionally heard updates from colleagues or friends. For them, Victor was no longer a looming figure. He was a reminder of the importance of standing up for themselves and each other. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Melissa turned to Ryan with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever think about how different things could have been if we hadn't faced all of that? Ryan paused, setting down the cutting board. I do, he admitted. And honestly, I think it would have been easier, but not better. We learned so much about ourselves and each other through all of it. Melissa nodded, her heart full. I feel the same way. It wasn't easy, but it made us stronger. And it taught me how important it is to have you by my side. Ryan smiled, pulling her into a hug. Always, he said softly, no matter what. Months later, as they welcomed their first child, a beautiful baby girl, they felt a profound sense of gratitude for the life they had built together. The nursery they had so lovingly prepared became a haven of warmth and love, filled with the laughter and tiny footsteps they had dreamed of. Their journey wasn't without its struggles, but they had proven to themselves and each other that love, resilience, and perseverance could overcome even the darkest challenges. As they sat in their living room one quiet evening, their baby asleep in her crib, Ryan turned to Melissa with a smile. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "We built the life we always dreamed of." Melissa leaned against him, her heart full. "And it's just the beginning." For Ryan and Melissa, their story was a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild. They had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and fear, but they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected than ever. Their future was bright, filled with the promise of new adventures, shared dreams, and the unshakable bond they had forged. Together, they had turned their trials into triumphs, proving that even the darkest chapters could lead to a life filled with light.